So good evening, everyone. My name is Jane Scanlon. I have been the sheltering lead in San Diego in the Southern California region and the Pacific Division. I will be moderating this session along with Sherry Curtis, who is the current Mass Care Regional Program Lead for Southern California region. So here we are at week 5. This is our second season of the Pacific Division Shelter Capacity Building Series. And we have about 15 sessions with the most requested topics for all of you guys. Each session is presented on Wednesdays from 6 to 7 and all use the same Teams link. The goal for this series has been to build our workforce confidence. We want to provide practical tips for our sheltering operations, including lessons learned from Hurricane Ian. We want to provide a collaborative environment across all of our function and activities. We want to provide a networking opportunity for all regions. You know, again, that is why we're putting our name and location in the chat so we understand who everyone is when we see others out on the job. And we want to increase the local volunteer engagement. We want to empower the regions to either host or present at least one of these sessions.
Thanks, Jane. And as you probably can see, this session will be recorded and is being recorded. The link to the recording will be sent out within a week along with the slides. All of the recordings for this session and for all the previous sessions, including last year, are posted on YouTube. And you can find the recordings by searching for Red Cross Pacific Division on YouTube. Your camera and your microphone have been disabled. So for now, you can type your questions in the chat while Timothy is presenting. And then the microphones will be open later on at the end for questions and answers. So without further ado, I am very happy to introduce our presenter for this evening, Timothy Dahlem. Timothy is the Pacific Division Information and Planning Lead, the Information and Planning Lead for the Los Angeles region, and the Red Cross Respond Application Lead for the Los Angeles region. Timothy also most recently deployed to Hurricane Ian as the Assistant Director of Information and Planning. Tonight, he's going to be taking a deep dive into the Incident Action Plan with us. So take it away, Timothy.
Well, good evening, everyone. And hello from the downtown LA regional headquarters. I'm going to go ahead and walk through the Incident Action Plan. What is it? Why is it? How is it? Where is it? And will it make me a better person? All shall be revealed. So we'll start out through a few of the topics here and then eventually walk through an IEP itself. So I'll start with a bit of a high level view of why we do the things we do and how it is. And then we'll actually look at one that I chose from Hurricane Ian only because if there's an error in that one, then I know who to blame, me, because I was the one that had to submit it at the end of the day. Okay, so the Incident Action Plan, what is it? You know, many times if you're deployed, you might see it show up in your inbox and wonder, why am I getting this thing? And why does Information and Planning keep, asking me for information? It can, if we don't give you context beforehand, it can be a little bit difficult to understand what's working behind the scenes, because there's many times in an operation so many levels of information and consolidation that's going up through the chain before it finally ends up in this sort of process. So if you deploy as a service associate, you'll have a supervisor. That supervisor will ultimately, like if it was Hurricane Ian, your supervisor will have most likely a supervisor who will then go to a manager, who will then go to an HQ manager, who will then go to me as an AD. And so there's so many levels, and it's going one way. It's not supposed to go around people. It's supposed to go through those levels so that all the information is checked as we go along. So that information all comes together as, as a plan that is developed through a process that is vetted and supported by the assistant directors and their teams, then approved by a disaster relief operation director or DRO director or job director. There's a couple different names that they have through the years that have stuck in other places. It keeps moving. So the plan is developed by operational leadership, and that's not just the operations section, that's all of the leadership in the operation. We're looking for specific, measurable, achievable, realistic, and time-bound objectives. You might have heard of SMART objectives. That's what that stands for. And those objectives are what we're trying to set out to accomplish in the next operational period, normally tomorrow. Currently, our operation periods start at 6 a.m. each day. And then what is the most important? So that's how we rank those priorities and objectives. And that's a process that we're working on throughout the day. A process that's required in all level 2 and above operations is to have this constant planning process that we in information planning will help to guide and lead, but ultimately we aren't responsible because we don't have all the information. We wait for that or actively solicit that from all of the other leadership. That process begins usually first thing in the morning, and then we run all the way through until the AD of Information and Planning will submit the last version of the plan to the DRO director or disaster relief operation director for final approval, unless it was just a few small things, and then that is what goes out to the workforce and to national headquarters and division and a lot of regional leadership. The goal behind it is to create a common operating picture so that whether you're a nurse, a feeding lead, a DES, just a brand new DES worker, disaster assessment manager, all of us understand exactly what we're doing, what we're prioritizing, what is the most important thing right now. So you'll see often that at the top of the list is mass care or sheltering or something to that effect. Sometimes we will emphasize even more the necessity for safety, because maybe there's something that's unusually or out of the ordinary that we really all have to be aware of. And if you're coming from out of region or out of disaster area, you might not be aware of it. So we might have to really prioritize safety of workforce and clients if there's something pertinent. If not, then sheltering is job one. That is mass care at its goal, at its core. And then what resources are available? What do we actually have to work with? How can we use that? And then what are we going to have to prioritize of people, things, funds, no matter what it is, equipment, in order to meet those orders of level of prioritization for sheltering. Let's say sheltering, SRT, damage assessment, those sorts of ideas as we go down it. They're big, broad buckets, and then underneath that we'll create a series of objectives that will be very specific and then bound by those SMART goals. And then safety of information, of course, and available support and guidance. Where are we actually, what, thought I was the only person in the building. It's okay. It's the sheltering for the Pacific Division presentation.
Shoot, we got it on.
Okay, and then I did skip one thing, of level 2 operations. You'll see the little table in the bottom right-hand corner. That is the final levels of operations and then how they'll fall according to number. So if you've ever been on at the beginning of an operation where you're standing things up and a lot of people are asking for how many homes are damaged or how many people will be displaced and approximately how long, and we're trying to get a ballpark idea, it's because we need to know what level of operation we're supposed to start out as and what we think we might end up as, because that will be very relevant to how we operate and what we submit in our initial planning tool that is kind of the preliminary to a service delivery plan. So what is it? Continuing, it conveys key information. We've got situational awareness in there, safety concerns. There's usually two places. One is if there's a high safety concern, that will go towards the top of the document. So you should see it right as you go past the first or second page. And then there will often be a more general, broad safety message that is down in the general messaging area right now. And then we discuss priorities and objectives. Those are kind of the bread and butter of the incident action plan. Lines of reporting and organizational structure, contact information for leadership. This is key when you go on to an operation. And right now, it would be a lot easier if you have the volunteer connection app on your phone. But if you don't, and all you have is that initial email that comes out with an IAP in it, you can see very quickly the work assignments, which are the heart of the incident action plan. This is derived from the 215 form, which is part of the operational planning worksheet process, which describes who and what things need to be where and to do what tasks. And will the work assignments meet the needs to accomplish the objectives? That is always in the work assignment section. So that's derived. So if you ever have someone for planning or a manager within operations ask you, so how many people do you need tomorrow, and how many people do you have tomorrow? Or how many cots do you need tomorrow, and how many do you have for tomorrow? That's where this information is going, so that we can have an idea of, okay, so we say we need this many, but have we ordered that many? Or are that many people on the way? Or are we just saying we need this, but nobody's gone through the extra steps? So that's part of the meetings that we will have throughout the day, the entire process that gets worked through. Why is it? So without a planning process, we are really, really less efficient or completely inefficient if we're not careful. We could miss a vulnerable population without operational coordination, whether that's within ourselves or with our partners. You can see sometimes in a disaster where everybody's concentrating on one area and they might forget about some extra areas outside that may be just as vulnerable or nearly as vulnerable and have needs that aren't being met because there's just too much concentration or oversaturation in the community, and that can create one, unnecessary waste, but two, unnecessary work, which will in the end make the staff feel like, well, why did I come all the way out here, and make you feel like your time wasn't valued if you're sitting around trying to figure out what to do because there's too many people in one place. It's even worse if you find that at the end of the day, oh, over here, they were swamped. They never were able to do everything they needed to today. Why weren't we just moved? So this is what the planning process is supposed to be for. Many times in the field, as a service associate or a supervisor, you have the blinders on and you are focused on accomplishing your tasks. The managers and above, their job is to make sure that those tasks, you can keep doing them without too much of a problem. We will always have problems because that's the real world. But if we can make sure resources and people are allocated around and we're taking care of each other as well as the clients, then that means our planning process throughout the day was good. And that's not just a meeting, it's all those places in between. There's a lot of communication. Communication is key to making it work. And I think, so the process brings all the parts of the operation together. So we're working to, you don't have to worry about it as a service associate, but your managers definitely do. That's really their job, is to make sure we're all working together and understand those needs and if they're being met. And then the incident action plan is there to communicate those objectives and a roadmap to our workforce. through our work assignments and the schedule of events that you'll see at the bottom, and maybe there's trainings available, contact information for the leadership. So when something goes wrong in your work assignment, you'll see I'm assigned here. This is ultimately my leader. And then if you don't have, if whatever is not being met isn't met by that leader, then you can look above that in the same exact chart and go, okay, this is their lead, this is their supervisor, so I can talk to them. So there's always a way for you to work your way through a chain. If you can just work straight through your direct supervisor, that's the most efficient, because then we don't have a span of control problem. Span of control would be, for instance, if every single person in damage assessment on Hurricane Ian, when I was the AD, only came to me and didn't ever go to their supervisor or the supervisor ad nauseum, I would have 157 people trying to talk to me at the same time. And I would definitely miss something. I would definitely drop something, and we would grind to a screeching halt. We try to break it down so that no one person has, optimal is 5 to 7 reports. 5 is really the best case scenario, but sometimes it can go up to 9. When you go beyond that, it almost always starts to become a span of control problem. And then the communication will break down, and then we won't meet our objectives, which ultimately meeting those objectives means meeting a need of a population that, or individual that's vulnerable. How is it? So you might have heard of the planning P. It's something that tends to be thrown at people in interesting situations that I've seen so far. But a planning P only happens once during an operation, during the initiating stages of a disaster relief operation. So those 5 little sections that you see on the slide that say phase 1 does not repeat is because it happens once. Once that first incident action plan is completed, then the tail of the P goes away and we go into the operational O. And that operational O continues until we demobilize and hand everything back to the region, which is usually when all ground activities have ceased, and there's just some maybe a bit of casework that still has to be done, maybe a bit of paperwork, but the bulk of the work is done. Though that planning O is grounded in 4 meetings. The first one that we use to start the day is the operational leadership meeting. If you ever go to a stand-up meeting in the morning, that usually comes after the operational leadership meeting, because leadership has to gather together, look at the reports that came in overnight, look at what our national organization thinks we reported, look at any problems that came in overnight, and make sure we are all one first thing in the morning before we jump into any briefing to try and tell the workforce what we think we're doing for the day. Then after that, you go towards a tactics meeting, which is the upper left corner of that in dark gray. But before you ever get to a tactics meeting, you have to complete strategies and tactics. Showing up to a tactics meeting with deciding now is the time to fill out a form defeats the purpose, because many times people think of, like, for instance, the 215, the operational tool, as a thing that must be filled out. And yet what it is it's part of a process that's supposed to be going between every single tactics meeting. So as soon as a tactics meeting is complete and we have the head of operations and the job director are in concurrence that this is what these are the assets we have, the people, the things that we have for the next operational period, and that it's approved, then a copy of that goes into an archive, and that same document, that same tool keeps being used so that you can start planning for the next 24-hour period, 48 hours out. So once you move past that, you evaluate the proposed tactics against available resources, make sure everything is synchronizing as you head towards the planning meeting. The planning meeting is where the AD of information planning and the documentation unit will come in and bring the IEP as we perceive it to be from all the information that has been gathered from and collected from all of the different activities that are ongoing. So we're soliciting all day. Is your contact roster updated? Was the 215 correct? Because the 215 can then be taken and turned into work assignments. Is all of the safety information correct? Did we get the newest situational awareness messaging that we need in there? And then when we get to that 4 o'clock is where it usually happens, planning meeting, we will sit down and we will work with all the other assistant directors and the DRO director and walk through it to make sure, does this look like what we're going to be doing as of 6 a.m. tomorrow morning? And make sure that everything is synchronizing and that nothing has changed. And it's sometimes it's the best we can do at the moment because things will change. Like if you've ever been on a California wildfire, and about 4 o'clock in the afternoon is when whatever you were planning, you throw it over your shoulder and start all over again. But if the process has been working correctly, then that means that you're ready to pivot quickly because you know that these things are possible, and you know where everything is and everybody is. And so therefore you can shuffle pretty quickly. If you don't know where everything and everybody are, then it's very hard to make a shuffle or pivot or make sure you didn't leave a trailer behind or a team doesn't get notified that the wildfire just flipped directions and it's coming towards you. These are all reasons to have everybody on the same page. Once the plan is approved, it's supported by all of the assistant directors and then approved by the job director, then we go into a final moment where we're making sure that that's correct all the way up until the operations briefing. And it used to be that was where the operational period began, but it's where we now convey what the operational period will look like as of tomorrow morning at 6 a.m. And the idea is to have the IAP or incident action plan ready at the exact same time so that you can have the briefing, explain to everybody what we're doing tomorrow, and then send them the IAP so that they have 2 pieces to contextualize. They can remember exactly what they heard because they also see it again. And then after that, we evaluate and assess operational results. That will happen both in the evening as well as in the morning. So part of that is if you ever have somebody from planning, especially an FSI, calling and going, hey, how many people did we serve today? How many cases did we open? How many meals did we serve? It's because all of that information has to be consolidated into another form that goes into a system that will turn out what's called the 5266. And that is part of the disaster operations control form is its official title. That feeds a bunch of different systems that will also feed into the current dashboard system that's called the DCOR, Disaster Control Operations Report. And we'll show that in a moment. And then we repeat. We wake up and make sure all of the systems from our national headquarters, they have different moments in time that they refresh themselves once-ish a day, depending on the system. And then by usually 6:30, 7 a.m. Eastern time, everything's refreshed and you can see what do they see what do they think that, according to the dashboards and all the reports, what do the systems tell them versus what do we know? And then do they match? And then why if they don't? Okay, now we get to where is it? Oops. It is in the DOC portal, which is the Disaster Operations Control Center portal. The DOC is also an actual body of people, especially during high disaster time. It's the national assistant directors that are from national headquarters and a lot of their specialists that will be available to help leadership on an operation if things go a little sideways or if we need some help or clarity on something. The DOC portal is accessible to all Red Cross volunteers within DCS as long as you have a Microsoft Office 365 account, which is also known as a Red Cross email address. which is one of the reasons you really want to make sure if you're going to deploy or think about deploying, talk to your disaster program manager or specialist if you have one, and they will be able to put in the IT ticket, information technology ticket, through national headquarters to get you a Red Cross email address. And then it also helps when you're trying to work and get any information that we have that we're sharing with each other. It's all shared through that system, normally in either Teams, like we have this meeting in currently, or in SharePoint. And SharePoint is the backbone to any files you find inside of Teams. It's also emailed to all assigned workforce every night via the DRO, Disaster Relief Operations Specific Group Share, which inside Volunteer Connection, you'll see there's a thing that says groups. And when you're assigned to an operation, at the bottom, it will have whichever disaster response number it is that you're assigned to there. And that is maintained by workforce so that we know exactly who's assigned. It's not I have to wait until a certain time and then ask, oh, can you send me a spreadsheet? And then maybe that changes again, or maybe it was a day. Oh, it's just there and I don't have to bug workforce. They're already updating and keeping that system relevant to the moment. And so I can just rely on that to be able to push out information to everyone. It's also how I can push out a flash report if something happened where we need to tell everybody it's a hazard of some sort. I was told that it might be printed and sent in sealed Mylar packaging via Pachyderm caravans, but I'm going to guess it's not on all operations. So if you, for some reason, don't receive an incident action plan at the end of the day, now, don't expect it exactly at 6 o'clock. A lot of highly dynamic operations, we won't get it out until 10, 11 o'clock at night. But you should get it before 6 a.m. the next morning, because that's when you're supposed to have that information in your hand. You might panic sometimes if you don't get it early in the evening, but it probably means we're just still working on it. We're usually the last people to walk out of the EOC or DOC, the Emergency or Disaster Operations Center. But if you don't get it, first check in Volunteer Connection, and I'll show you how to do that in a second. It'll show as soon as you become assigned to something in your regular browser version of Volunteer Connection, it will show up under your name, and it'll change the way it looks normally. But if you have the Volunteer Connection app, that will also tell you, and it will be pinging you every day, asking you to check in. So if you don't get asked to check in, or you don't see that you're assigned in either place, talk to your supervisor. And if they're not able to help their supervisor, and if not them, then if you're on an operation, go and find staff services or workforce, because they will be able to help make sure you're assigned to the actual operation. Also, before you go through anything else, if you think you're assigned according to all the things in Volunteer Connection, check your spam folder. Because we're sending out something every day that looks very similar in the body text and in the heading, it's just a serialization of IEP 1, 2, 3, then sometimes spam programs will think, oh, this is spam. But the document that we attach to it in PDF form will be actually different every day. And then also, if your supervisor doesn't understand, sees that you're attached, then they will either reach out to us, or you can as well. And it's usually our documentation unit, and if they're not, then it would be the AD. But don't think you have to email the AD for everything, especially on a large operation. You might get lost in the inbox, not intentionally. It's just on a level 7 or something like that. The inbox gets a little intense. So let's take a walk through an incident action plan, but I'll also show you right now how to get there. Hold on. Need to back out of that for a second. Okay. I have the other tabs up just in case something happened here. Okay, so to get to the incident action plan, you would go to volunteer, or you can go to Volunteer Connection, if you for some reason didn't get it, or if you're trying to get an idea before you go out on an operation of the scope of things and you want to look back through a few IEPs to understand what has been happening, then this is the place to go. So you'll see under my picture here, there is Edge, Exchange, IT Service, RC View, and Resource Library. If you're assigned to an operation, it will also say, there will be a box here that will say assignment. And then if you have people reporting to you, there'll be a place that will show your direct reports. So to get to the easiest way, in case you don't have it bookmarked or you're on somebody else's computer or a DR computer, you can't remember the exact address on the internet, then you can click RC View and you'll see this page come up. You will look for the National Operations Summary and you'll click on that. And then it's a bit slow to load because it's very heavy on data. And all of you can get to the National Operations Summary as long as you have a DCS gap or DCS position. Actually, you don't even have to be capped. And gap is group activity position. So that means that you've completed all the trainings for one of the positions. I'll take a quick moment here to say, this is also a great place to gather information and understand what's going on, especially if you're going to be heading out towards an operation. It will show you the number of DROs that are active, how many multifamily fires, where the shelters are. You can see a lot of little blue dots here in California because all of the snow and wind events have been causing havoc. Even in my neighborhood, power poles are down. So, and it will also show you the weather and any upcoming risks that we have. The doc portal is up here. It just says click here for doc portal under the situation summary tab. And that will take you here. Normally it'll ask you to log in. And it's the login is your volunteer connection login because it's through single sign-on. And then if you want to see where, well, I have to upload docs. You probably won't. DRO viewer is where you can see all of the active operations, and the active ones are here where it says active. And then if you want to see a closed operation, if you have some historical questions you need to ask of a previous operation, you can actually find them in here. And then you would go to, in my case, I went to Hurricane Ian and downloaded, you would go, let's see here. So if I want to find Ian, that is closed. Ian, it's going to bring up a bunch of things. But not the one I wanted. Let's see. There we go. Search for the state and it pops up. So you would go in here. There were 139 days on that operation. It was a 7. STP was submitted. You can see there. You can see the last executive summary. You can also view previous summaries if you want to get a historical perspective as you're heading somewhere. You would click on view previous, and you can see everything that has been summarized at the end of the day, kind of where we are and where we're going very quickly for any operations management, especially at national headquarters and division. And then the documents are here, and you can see all 104 of them. In my case, I pulled down the incident action plan number 40 because I was AD there. So if something looks funny or I realize there was an error, that's on me. Okay, so the beginning of the IEP, let's see, we're at 6:34, so I will pace myself here. Almost always we try and start with a photo. In this case, it happens to be the day that we hit over 200,000 damage assessments. And then they went on to actually have more than $250,000, so it was a little over 250,000 damage assessments in the swath that ran through Florida from Fort Myers, Coral Beach area, all the way over up to Daytona Beach. You'll see at the top, and you'll see at the top of every page, it should be the incident name, the disaster response number, and the operational period that this is going to occur in. So you might notice that, no, okay, it's because I changed it to redacted. The publication, the name of the document will have the date that it's published. So it should be a different day than the operational period. So this was for November 3rd, so the document would have had November 2nd, 2022, because that was the day that it was published. Let me go full size here so you guys can see. Oh, and now it went too small. I'll go back. Okay, so we'll go down here. Bottom of the page, it will tell you the documents that are included. Smaller operations, you might not need all of this information, but here in Ian, we had every single page you would normally have and a few others. Prepared by, sometimes if it's just like a level 2 operation like what we had recently here in LA, then you might just see like my name on the one that I did or Margie's name on the one that she did. But in this case, it's not prepared by any one person. It's prepared by the entire planning section. So we just put information planning and then the job director's name, Dave Gutierrez from the National Incident Command Team. We've got a director's intent. This is where the DRO director will lay out the basic intent for this operation and any special messages that they feel are relevant for this upcoming operational period. Sometimes this will change every day if it's incredibly dynamic. Other times you'll see one message that will stay there for in this case, a couple of weeks, because we were in this very steady state of just trying to crank out and do all the things that we needed to, and we all knew where we were, and there wasn't a whole lot of major change that was happening. Occasionally some small part would change, like maybe a link to the Florida F511 mobile app or something like that. You'll also usually see some maps, RC view links, and that would take you to the director's brief for this operation. And in this case, it also takes you to a story map that was put together of everything that we had been doing so far by national headquarters, as the public affairs people would come through, and the cameras and photographers, and they would write stories about everything. That would go up onto this story map. And you can actually still find it. It's still up there with the last of the stories that went in. An account string, which I redacted a few things in here just because this will be going up on YouTube afterwards. But the account string is relevant to anyone that is approving 6409s, which are the requests for material goods. So plans and objectives. This is where we sat, where we thought we were going to be for November 3rd. So our priorities were, number one, mass care, because with sheltering also came feeding, also came SRT, shelter resident transition, also came disaster mental health, disaster health services, disaster spiritual care, disability integration. The whole umbrella that can be mass care was the number one priority. Number two was incident care and condolence team. This was for any of the clients or people in Florida that may have lost someone during the hurricane or directly thereafter because of the hurricane. This we needed to make sure that we were on top of that and really looking towards anyone that needed that extra support because of losing a loved one. Individual disaster care. So this was beyond under mass care. This was also going on in the community, sometimes outside of the shelters. So at some of the disaster aid stations that we had throughout the state. Damage assessment. This was an everyday, it was incredibly important, but the most important thing was mass care to make sure people actually had a safe place while we and others were assessing what needed to be done within the state and who had a home to return to. And external relations. External relations, if you're not familiar with them, are the people that will contact our counterparts outside of the Red Cross, whether it's a county, another non-governmental organization like Salvation Army or Suchi or Team Rubicon, or there's so many different other partners we work with over the course of an operation. These are our contacts with them. From those priorities, we then have objectives, and each of these numbered objectives will tie back to a priority. So all of mass care here, which is number one priority, will feed into all of the number one objectives. And we'll probably just go through the mass care ones for here so we have time. So mass care objectives were operate 5 Red Cross managed shelters and then support another one. And in this case, we spelled them out because we wanted to make sure our workforce and our partners understood where we would be. Implement SRT, and these documents get really full of acronyms. We actually have an entire acronym definition document that you can download off the exchange. So this was shelter resident transition and community engagement programs, and government operations were collaborating to overcome any shelter resident transition roadblocks that began. So you get an idea. This is really breaking down into some very tight specifics what we were going to do in this upcoming period. Jump to, this is a new one. If you're familiar with how we operated before July of last year, we would have had something called a sit rep or situation report. This is now what is mostly left of that. And it's looking at, did we meet the objectives set the day before for the current period? Did we operate 5 shelters? Did we implement collaboration? And if there's a significant action, then we'll put that over here in the column on the right. The incident open action tracker, these are a lot of very long-term, often goals that we have, reaching 99% of direct detailed damage assessments. That was set for November 10th. There was an update from shelter resident transition completion every day, and that was expected to happen every day. And we show who the mission owner is. That gives you kind of an idea there. Contact roster, I've taken out phones and emails just in case, because sometimes people use their personal phones here to make sure that it goes straight to them and they don't have any sort of delay when somebody calls. So you can see we had our 24-hour lines for our Red Cross workforce, 24-hour lines for clients and community, and then our leadership. We had our command, our multiple deputy directors and liaisons, the operations section, everybody that's at headquarters. And then I'll scroll past this because we'll get to the incident organization chart. This gets broken down more fine grained as you would, and then you would on a small operation, because we actually show not just the command and section staff, but we had individual sections. So here is operations and how it was working under the deputy AD of response. It's a very different ball game about a week later, when you had both a deputy assistant director of response and a deputy assistant director of recovery, as the operation shifted heavily into the recovery phase. And we'll scroll down. Every single one has its own TO, there are table of organization. These are the work assignments that I was talking about earlier. So once we gather all the information, it will end up here. And in this case, this was for sheltering. You'll see, for instance, at the Anna Chuck Deaver Center, these are how many shelter supervisors, service associates, health services, RC care, recovery workers, both the manager and 4 SAs or service associates, how many shifts when they begin, And then who is the day and night shift leader? So this is the person ultimately that is the lead contact at the shelter, often referred to as a shelter manager. Even if they don't have that specific gap, that is they're the manager of that shelter. And you can see, so if you ever try to contact either one of these people and could not find them, then you would jump straight up here. Here's the headquarters sheltering manager. And then if for some reason you aren't able to get a hold of them, then you jump up to the AD of operations, which was at the time Richard Goldfarb. And every single one of the shelters had this. Yep, go ahead.
Hey, Timothy, it's Jane. I just want to give you a 15-minute notice.
Okay, thank you. So you can go through this. This was a really long document, so I will skip past this. Let's see here. I will go down to. We also had a work site section. Now, in this case, these were all of the places we might have been working from that weren't included in those upper work assignments. So a base camp or a warehouse or a hotel that we might have been working out of, the headquarters at Chico. There's also a general message, and this is what we were talking about earlier with some of the safety messaging that can go in here. This heavy on COVID because we were still in the midst of that. Out processing, a little bit of almost everything you need to know in general about being on an operation if you've never been on one before, even how to reload your mass care procurement card. Let's see here. And then past all of this, there was a training schedule, and then at the very bottom of the document, we had the daily schedule, which shows you when the meetings are, when things are due, when other things are supposed to happen, and usually where. I will stop there and jump right back to my slide for a second. So one of the key questions that we need to answer was, will this make me a better person, the incident action plan? And the answer is yes. Yes, it will. Jump to questions.
Oh, Timothy, that was amazing. I feel like a better person already, just so you know. Thank you so much. Brenda had asked, what do you mean by maps and links to mapping products? Are there links actually on the IAP that we can link to all of the mapping information that you guys are creating?
Yeah, there is quite free. There's definitely a link to the director's brief, and that usually incorporates a lot of the information that you'll be looking for. It's kind of a one-stop shop. Let's go back to. Okay.
And then along with that, Eway wants to know, this is a big document. It could be, 40 pages, and who wants to read 40 pages? So
Yep.
if it were you, what would be the top items that you would read every day?
Well, and I can actually give you a really good answer. It's still fresh in my mind because I started in 2020 under the pandemic, and I had no idea what I was doing. I was involved in a feeding program here in Los Angeles, working with our school district and the LA Regional Food Bank. And the first time I got an incident action plan, I did read it from front to back, trying to understand what is this they just sent me. And then I realized, oh, okay. So the key is like, where am I working tomorrow? The work assignment. Do you find yourself in that work assignment? That's super important. The director's brief. So this, if you can see right here, where it says maps, RC view, and let's see something. Not sure if it's still operating or not. Nobody's refreshing it, so things have started breaking almost certainly at this point. But this is what a director's brief would look like. There you go. There's situational awareness and weather, current service delivery. So a lot of the mapping products we're creating would be here. And if they're not, then you absolutely reach out to us or your manager or your supervisor, and they'll be able to tell you where that is.
So when we go out on the job, is the IAP pretty much a standard form? So if I'm looking at it from job to job, is it going to be about the same setup with clickable links right at the top?
It should. Mind you, if it's one poor soul, that is the entire IP section, maybe not at first. It depends on if we have the capacity. But yeah, it should. It should be pretty standard. The clickable links at the top are built into the national template. And then if for some reason, like I think there was a version of it that was up there for a little bit that was had some hiccups in the links. It was easy to fix, and then we sent that back up to national, just let them know this is fixed now. This will work. If it's not clickable, then you might realize that it might be an indicator of the information and planning team being overwhelmed or understaffed.
Oh, I'm sorry if they're ever understaffed. So you were saying that if if the situation is changing constantly or it's a ever, dynamic, do you guys send out like a midday update just for like safety messages for the people to understand the current situation?
Usually we try and get all of these individual supervisors to talk to their teams. That's the best way to get that information out. But if something seriously happens, and I've had to issue quite a few of them on our wildfires here, then we will put out through information and planning, we'll put out a flash report or a spot report. Flash report would go to all of the workforce, and a spot report would go to very specific section of the operation that might need that information more quickly than anybody else would.
Well, Timothy, while you were in Florida, you had Hurricane Ian, and then you had Hurricane Nicole, I think, come during that.
Yep.
So that's what I was thinking of.
Yep.
So what I'm hearing you say though is I think the volunteers get overwhelmed when we talk about all these reports. Here is the IAP, the Incident Action Plan, and then the 215 and the 5266, the dashboard. We talked about frost. Do you feel like this is the most important document that everyone should know and understand to make us a better person?
Yeah, I really do. It's kind of it's not just important to planning. It's really important to the operation because it's what the operation as a whole is putting out to all of our workforce and all of our partners and the rest of our organizations, so that we all understand what we're supposed to be doing tomorrow and what the goals are, what those really key things are that we're supposed to accomplish together. And if we know that, then it means that everybody knows at the same time that this is the most important thing, then this, and we all need to work together, because you'll hear this. I hear it outside of the Red Cross, but I hear it in the Red Cross sometimes of stay in your lane. What everybody forgets is stay in your lane, do your job to your best of your ability, and help others to succeed in theirs. It's the and help others to succeed in theirs that we forget. So if we make sure that mass care is number one priority, or sheltering is number one priority, and that means I need to transition out of whatever I'm doing to make sure that people are taken care of, then that's what we have to do for a little bit until we have reinforcements arrive.
Well, that you put that very well. So the question, I was wanting to know if anyone else had any questions on it. We have covered all of the questions in the chat. Does anyone have anything else that you would like to raise your hand? Let me know.
And actually, you may touched on something there. So I touched on what people that are new should read. What about people in headquarters and assistant directors? You should be looking for whether or not your objectives and your priorities are portrayed correctly, whether your information is correct. So if you see every day that the plan is going out and there are people listed in the contact roster that aren't still on, or that left the operation a week ago, but they're still being published as HQ manager of something or other, that's problematic. So you definitely need to pay attention to making sure that information we're putting out every day correctly reflects as an assistant director or a manager or a DRO director what we are actually doing.
Perfect. Then can anyone submit ideas for the IAP? Oh, and we have a hand up. Let me see.
Yep. And
Joan,
ideas
go ahead.
would go. Ideas would go through the chain. So if you push that to your supervisor, and then they will push it up the chain so that it gets to the right person. If everybody emails documentation unit or the AD, then yeah, we'll get overwhelmed too quickly. Go ahead.
Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay. The example you gave for Ian is a very large, intimidating operation. Can you suggest one that would be of a smaller scale that I could look at to get a concept of something not so overwhelming?
Sure. I can pick on myself again. We just had a little level 2 operation that was here in Los Angeles. It was a one house and then 2 apartment complexes next to it. That was DR 106-23. I think it's labeled as East LA MFF, although on the IEPs you'll see it's listed as Reno Street MFF, and that's because that was what we originally named it. And then for some reason they named it East LA, even though it wasn't in East LA. But once it's in the system, it sticks. And on that one, it was me. I was IP, except for 2 other people that went out with me to do damage assessment.
Does that answer your question, Joan?
Yes, it does. Thank you. I thought I would also look up if we did anything at the Del Rio earthquake to get a feeling of what happened on that whole roll.
And it's interesting right now, if you look in the doc portal, we have the doctrine that says that level 2s and above all need to have this process ongoing, but a lot of multifamily fires you won't see an IAP for. So it can get a little frustrating if you're clicking through a whole bunch of them. But I know in our case we had one because we try and keep the practice up within our region. But then if you look at level 3s, all of those should have IAPs attached to them, even if they're a small level 3, which could just be a multifamily fire that ran a bit long with sheltering or had quite a number of clients involved.
For Timothy, I am hoping that everyone reads their IAP every day and understands to look in their junk email every day for it. If not, the other question is, how our the Volunteer Connection app changes when you're on deployment. Does it pop up under? Do we have a little box? I can't remember that says IAP information on that new? Not yet.
Not currently.
We should put in that. Okay, maybe we should put in that request to
that was part of putting together. That was part of the putting together the doc portal, is that it's eventually supposed to link in.
All right. Does anyone else have any comments, questions, concerns for Timothy tonight? Well, Timothy, I think it was a fabulous night tonight. You gave us such great information, and I appreciate everyone coming on and joining us tonight. We have Cynthia is going to be on next Wednesday for the SRT presentation, so please join us again next Wednesday.